Today's episode is supported by our friends at the Heinz History Center and their exhibit, Pittsburgh's Hidden History. All the curators got to bring up some of their favorite pieces, all from storage, and a lot of these items are on display for the very first time. You will see a mini dress made of aluminum, old menus from local restaurants, the nostalgia, and a spooky vampiress from an old Kennywood ride. It is such a cool peek into Pittsburgh's past and also the minds of our Heinz History Center curators. And remember, kids 17 and under get free admission to the museum every single day, thanks to the Cayman Free for Kids initiative. For more information and to plan your visit heinzhistorycenter.org. This is CityCast Pittsburgh. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about.
ICE is Trump's American Gestapo.
Residents have been pulled out of cars. Children taken from their families, separated because of the color of their skin.
Our immigrant neighbors are hardworking and valuable members of our communities, and regardless of their status here, they should be treated with dignity and respect.
This agency is dangerous, and we, as a county, should not be collaborating with them in any capacity.
If this comes to this city, I'm going to be out there right with them. Like, you know, I'm an Irish Catholic kid. I'll get out of jail in 24 hours, right? Like, at least that's what I was used to in Pittsburgh anyway, you know.
I'm downtown with our county executive, Sara Innamorato. Hello.
Hello.
And those voices you just heard are residents here in the county, taxpayers, people really friggin' sick of seeing their neighbors kidnapped by federal agents off the street. So, Sara, let's start there. What can your office reasonably do about ICE in Allegheny County?
Well, there's not much, but we've worked with immigrant and refugee serving groups. We've worked with the ACLU to really see how we can walk the line between compliance with, federal and state law and also protecting our neighbors. So what we have done here in Allegheny County is really deploy policies across departments, which is saying like ICE cannot use our property to stage any events or arrests. They're obviously, just like anybody, can enter public spaces in government buildings. We also do not cooperate with ICE, whether it's our police or our jail. They do in any of our providers, ICE is required to have a judicial warrant if they enter the building. So absent of that, they're not allowed to enter any private spaces within the county or within our provider network.
Yeah, and those are all existing policies within the county?
Yes.
At what point did those become part of our county code, our ethos, the difference between formal and informal?
So many of these policies are standard practice. We don't
the kind
do
of thing you don't have to think about until now?
Exactly. And then, when this administration took over and we saw a declaration that they would increase ICE presence and deportations, we looked at our policies and see where they could be strengthened and where we could do education with our workforce on what our policies are.
Did you find through the course of that people already knew this stuff, or was this new information?
I think it's new information for people.
Yeah.
We just haven't seen this type of presence in the past. So, it is new for our region. Anything we can do to make sure that our employees know what our policies are, that our service providers know what the expectation is of them as a grantee of the county, and, just making sure that we're also equipping our frontline staff. So yes, police, to make sure that they are trained in ABLE, which is how to intervene with other law enforcement officers when they see them breaking the law. But also, we have public defenders and CYF caseworkers making sure that they're equipped with de-escalation training and, how to observe and intervene in a safe and legal way.
It seems like such a complex balance, from your position, and anyone who interacts with the county really right now, if ICE comes anywhere near it, if the federal government wants to touch it, like if the county touches something, the federal government can get their hands on it too. How do you balance that when you work with advocacy groups, when you're talking to your own employees, of wanting to support people, want to support our immigrant community without exposing them to additional risk?
Yeah. Well, this is why we've really taken the lead from immigrant and refugee serving organizations. And we've walked the line between being in compliance with what's expected to us by the federal government so that we can continue to receive critical funding in housing and human services, while also saying, like, here's where we can be a good partner. And, you know, what we've heard from our immigrant refugee serving organizations is really to continue to talk about the positive impact that immigrants have had on our region, both economically and culturally, and how they're a critical piece of our community. And, you know, really just emphasizing that we are a welcoming place. But, you know, that has worked for the last 12 or so months. But you know, we're seeing a ramp up of enforcement. We're seeing the events that have happened in Minneapolis. So, you know, now there's just far more fear that has infiltrated that community. So we don't have a playbook for what to do, but we remain in constant communication across our departments with these organizations just to say, how can we make sure that we are keeping, above all, these individuals, our neighbors, safe? And, you know, that is not always public-facing declarations. A lot of it is behind-the-scenes work that we do quietly and strategically to support these neighbors.
Do you ever feel pressure to make that public statement? Like, we have a lot of lawmakers that do that. We have many who don't. How do you strike the balance?
I think in this time right now, we need to not be afraid of the federal government as leaders, right? As elected leaders, we need to push back, but push back with a legal argument, with a measured argument, with a data-informed argument on the impact that increased ICE presence has in our communities, right? If you're looking at what happened in Minneapolis and, you know, the murders of the two individuals who were, you know, protesting their presence, like, that is an atrocity. And also, if you look at how Minneapolis's economy has been impacted, it has been a tremendous decline in output and people attending work and kids going to school. And that, like, shuts down a local economy, and that's bad for everybody. So it's also making messages like that front and center when we're talking to, you know, the business community here, and saying, like, this is the negative ripple effect of this increased enforcement, because it's not, you know, we don't have ICE coming in with a scalpel and removing, you know, quote unquote, the, you know, hardened criminals and getting them out of our country. They are taking a sledgehammer and they are just racially profiling and plucking people off the streets who have gone through the system, have thought they had asylum, are working towards their green card, are employed and paying taxes, you know, and that when people see that part happen, regardless of their political affiliation, they have been outraged, I would say, by the overreach of the federal government in this moment. So we are calling out that overreach and also, you know, continuing to, you know, meet the standards so that we can continue to get money to operate our county and deliver for people here.
What is that balance like for you, though? Like, you know, you're talking about making these arguments, and data should work. Data should work. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't seem like it does. It doesn't seem like humanity as an argument works right now. I think that's the feeling that I pick up from the internet and from the people that, like, you know, email us a lot, is everything just feels so impossible right now and so bleak.
Yeah.
And you're in charge of it all.
Yeah. Yes, I am in charge of it all. And also, I cannot do it alone. Yeah. Right? We elect leaders to be able to administer bureaucracies and make sure that government can be a force for good in people's lives. And also, government only works when people believe in it and they participate in the civic space. So if you're frustrated and you feel helpless about what's going on at the federal government, then there are so many organizations to get involved in. So, outside of local government and passing local ordinances, there's organizations like Casa San Jose that run a rapid response network, and you can sign up to be a volunteer and to help your neighbors whenever, there's an ice raid that happens, or, how to observe in that moment, legally, peacefully, and in an effective way. So, there's ways to channel that anger and frustration into a proactive response that actually contributes to building a network of safety and community.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have federal partners in this moment?
We do. It is a balance, because we have the outrage of what's happening with the ICE raids and with the Department of Homeland Security. And the other side of that coin is that we still, have to communicate with our senators, with our congresspeople around what are the needs of Allegheny County residents. So we, have worked really hard to bring back millions of dollars for trails and for supporting county infrastructure and for supporting big housing initiatives. You have to be able to do it all and wear many hats and really pick the fights that you want to fight and make sure that the outcome of that fight is a net positive for Allegheny County.
Kind of talking about the policy side of all of this, how would you say the county's existing policies compare to what's on the table with the county council bill in relation to how we operate with federal agents?
So many of it is, I guess, codifying what is already practice, standard practice and policy. So that really doesn't change. There's things within the ordinance that are questionable whether it's enforceable. So
you mean like the parts where we say the sheriff's department and
Exactly.
the DA's office aren't allowed to help ICE?
yes,
That was the part to me that I'm like, I don't know if we can do that.
Yeah. So there's a question mark there. I think in this moment, it again calls for approaches that are going to keep people safe and, going to send a message to the broader public that while we can't do everything, we are going to exercise the full extent and power of this office. So it does send that signal, which is important. But really, if we do want the row, and I'm not going to speak for the row offices and what their policies are, but if we do want them to, adopt similar policies, it really is putting, having conversations with the leaders of those row offices and getting clarity from them what their policies and procedures are.
Yeah. I can imagine a lawsuit might come. I feel like the city has a long tradition of passing policies that are dubiously enforceable. And they get sued and sometimes they get struck down, but sometimes they last or some portion of the legislation lasts. I mean, you said you would sign it if it makes it to your desk. Does that mean that you think it's like, forgive the phrase, but like we should F around and find out?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to sign what it is that the moment demands that we do something. We just want to make sure that that something ultimately is a net positive for the immigrants and refugees that are here in Allegheny County.
In terms of like, I know enforceability is a big question mark, but in terms of what it could substantially do, you work here in the county courthouse, and we keep hearing reports of people being taken while coming here for court appointments. It does make one wonder who's telling, like, is ICE hanging around the building? Do you see them when you come to work? Or is someone telling them, hey, you might want to come here at this time? Is a county employee snitching?
I don't know.
I know you can't obviously know everything, but it does make one wonder and makes one wonder if this county ordinance could change that.
I don't think that a county ordinance can change that. I think we have policies and procedures on the books. We have consequences when those policies are violated. And it's about making sure that every county employee that's under our jurisdiction, so across the county departments, not necessarily the row offices, are educated on those policies. So, we do that at the present, and we'll continue to do that.
I mean, to that ICE component, do you see them here? Have you witnessed personally any of this stuff?
I have not.
Yeah.
But I do know people personally who have been impacted.
Yeah, I think all of us do at this
yeah.
point because it's becoming so prevalent.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I've heard people say that they're upset that the county doesn't have like a big safety plan, like some comprehensive thing.
Mm-hmm.
If the worst occurs, if, we end up in a position like Minneapolis, and of course the worst has occurred for some of our neighbors. I don't want to minimize
Absolutely.
that. Can you explain why?
Well, I will say we do have plans, and the parties that need to know what that plan is, and it is constantly evolving as new information comes out, as we see events like Minneapolis take place. Things we do come to the table across our emergency services and police and human services and partners who serve immigrant and refugee communities here throughout Allegheny County, and say what needs to be done, what could we do together.
Yeah.
And we put things in place and we all play our role. And I think that's an important thing to emphasize, is that different layers of government, different organizations, businesses, we all have a role to play in this, and we all need to make sure that it's happening in concert with one another, and that it's supportive and collaborative. And it's doesn't always mean someone like myself taking a mic and screaming into the void, but using the power and the tools that we have to make sure that we can continue to make sure our neighbors are safe.
Can you put plans like that in writing? Like, is that wise?
Or do
you have to approach it with
all
caution?
All of our policies at the county are in writing.
Which means that the federal government could see any of it too.
Well, and that's why we put policies in place, and we write down policies that are we feel like we can defend because they're legally in compliance with the federal government, and also that make sure that we're protecting the privacy and the safety of our neighbors that live here. So it is a constant balance. And there's times where we have been asked to sign agreements from departments within the federal government that would give us money that we haven't been able to sign because we feel like it's a violation of our duty or our legal obligation.
Can you give me an example of something that like crosses a line for you?
One grant said they required like unfettered access to our jail, so they could come in at any time, or they could access our data. And that's just one, it's not legal, and two, it's out of compliance with our policy, and could be dangerous. So
when you talk about compliance, like we have to comply with the feds, but you also are, as best you can, trying to get them to comply with the county too.
Yes, and there are sometimes monetary consequences to that in our ability to deliver on programming, because we can't access certain federal funds any longer. But for the most part, we've been able to keep in place our federal monies by remaining in compliance and being able to argue in court that we are in compliance and that we are entitled to these dollars.
And the compliance piece. So like we're using the money how we said we would. And
exactly.
We're not overstepping, and we don't want you to overstep either.
Yes.
Huh.
So it is interesting. It's a power struggle. But it's also, making sure that we can continue to function as a county, because, we have nearly a $3 billion budget that we have to put to work each and every day for every single county resident. So we have to still be able to plow the roads. We still have to be able to address homelessness. We have to, continue to operate a jail and, run our park system. So, there's still so much work to do, and we need to make sure that we are unencumbered to, manage all of that.
Before we move on, New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani signed an executive order recently barring ICE from entering their city properties, like schools, hospitals, shelters, that kind of thing, without a judicial warrant.
Is that something you think the county could do?
We already do that.
The judicial warrant piece?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're not, again, if we have public spaces, anyone can come into public spaces. But when you're talking about county property, when you're talking about entering the jail, for example, no ICE agent is allowed to come into the jail unless they have a judicial warrant. So,
but what about like hospitals or schools? I know our school systems are different here.
Yeah. And this is where, when you have an integrated system like in New York, where those are under the purview of the mayor's office, that is not the case here in Allegheny County. So I have, the county courthouse, we have the human services, but like we have some buildings, but we don't touch schools in any way, shape, or form. So that would have to be a policy adopted by each one of the 43 different school districts here in Allegheny County. When you're talking about municipal buildings, we have 130 municipalities. So each municipality would have to adopt that type of policy. So
fragmentation bites us again.
Well, and in this sense, yes.
Okay.
Today's show is brought to you by Living Memory. A few years ago, I did this audio interview with my grandma asking about her life story, and while it's really meaningful to go back and re-listen, there are some things it just did not capture, like her mannerisms, the way she'd crack the teeniest smile when saying something deadpan, even just how it felt to be sitting in her living room. I really wish Living Memory had been around when she was still around. It's a service that uses virtual reality to capture your loved ones' legacies and wisdom. Living Memory does these really in-depth interviews with your loved ones and then provides you with this beautiful immersive footage so you can save their story and their presence. I got to try it out and it was pretty remarkable. I put on this VR headset and instantly felt like I was sitting right in the room with this couple as they told the story of how they first met. I got to see their little tics and the tender ways they looked at each other while hearing detailed stories from their lives. With Living Memory, you don't just get to preserve someone's story, you get to hear the way they tell it and feel like you are right there with them. For information, testimonials, and more, head over to livingmemoryxr.com. That's livingmemory, the letter X, the letter R.com.
You also teased something at the county council meeting last week where you were delivering your quarterly address that is also seemingly Mom Donnie inspired, but I don't know if that's true, regarding childcare.
I've been following the new administration in New York City and saw some broad sweeping reforms regarding affordable and accessible childcare on top of universal pre-K. And I was just wondering if there's any plans in your administration to implement something like that here and what I can do to try to encourage my council members to support that as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Councilperson Hallam, you will be pleased with our next executive order. I'm sure of it, which we will introduce in early spring.
I'm curious, can you share anything about that now?
So I will say it is not inspired by the current mayor of New York. It is something that we have been working on since my time in office.
It came up in regards to a question about something he just did.
Yes. So I will say that, keep in mind the first week I was in office, I signed a check to put $500,000 into our child care programs. Mm-hmm. So and that's our Allegheny County Child Care Matters program. So, since then we've been listening to providers, listening to groups like Trying Together, foundations that fund childcare and out-of-school programs, our Human Services, our Department of Children's Initiatives, and really saying, what does the childcare ecosystem need? And I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's over 1,000 slots of childcare would be opened up if we could just hire the vacancies in the childcare field. So if we had childcare professionals that we could train and then retain in these positions without adding any sort of infrastructure, we'd open up 1,000 slots, which would be great for working families across Allegheny County. So we've been working on shifting money from economic development to support childcare providers. We're thinking about how we continue to help families pay for childcare, thinking about, how we support the workforce that's needed in order to provide the workforce needed for the care economy. So really thinking about those elements. And, we've made smaller moves throughout my 2 years in office, but, we really want to put something up under a big umbrella that says we are a great place in Allegheny County to raise a family, to, make sure that you can work and provide for your family and have that work-life balance and quality of life that really, I think everyone's seeking.
Do you have any sense of what those positions might pay? I feel like that's the piece I always see is like, it shouldn't be, but it is often low paid work.
Yeah, absolutely it is, right?
And you've done a lot in your administration to try to bring up some of the lower salaries here in the county.
Yeah. And I will say that the county doesn't run any child care facilities directly. Yeah. We partner and we fund child care facilities. So but when we think about the workforce challenge, like, yes, it's about training, but when we're talking about that retention piece, pay is a huge part of it. What you normally get in the childcare space is mostly women, and it's
early career.
Yep. Or they're mid-career and they have children. And a way for them to get subsidized childcare is for them to actually work at a childcare center. But then once their children are school aged, they'll often exit that role and move on to a different work.
And there's been some wonderful retirees who've taken care of my children too. But the pay piece is just so challenging.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're really excited when the governor's budget passed last year, where it had that. It was very minimal, but it was so small little stipend, but it set up the program. And, in this budget address, he adds more money to it, which again, it's like just a nominal increase, but it is something. And it begins to send the signal that, this is a group of people who are vital to our economy. It's not vital just for caring for children and for that critical 0 to 3 development, but vital to our economy. And I think that's the message we have to marry with the conversation around childcare constantly, that this is, when we invest in childcare, we're actually investing in economic growth, because anyone who wants to participate in our economy should have that opportunity. And if they do not have high quality childcare, they don't have the flexibility to care for an aging loved one, then they have to exit the workforce. And that drags our economy down across, all sectors. So
to be clear, I don't know anybody that pays less than $250 a week for childcare for a single kid. And that's for not full week. That's usually 2 to 3 days per week.
Yep, absolutely.
It can range up to $500. And again, this is not even preschool.
Yes. And
I think you have to put numbers on it, because you don't realize how incredibly expensive this can be.
Well, yes. I mean, it's like sending your kid to a 4-year college, right? And
I pay more for daycare than I paid for my entire undergraduate degree.
Yeah. It's incredible. And the thing is, we can't expect families to cover the cost for increased wages for childcare workers. And so this is why
I do want them to make more than $15 an hour, unfortunately, is sort of standard. A good wage is more like $18.50, $20, $22, but that's hard to come by.
Exactly. And oftentimes, even at $15 an hour a few years ago, we're talking about people with their master's degree, right, in childhood development, and making $15 an hour, which is, under $40,000 a year, or roughly around that annual wage, which is like, it's not enough to support a family on.
And that's not take-home pay either.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And when you're talking about what is the living wage for a family of 4, 2 working parents, 2 kids, and just to meet basic needs, not even savings and going on vacation, it's like almost $120,000 a year. So, if you're talking about one parent making $40,000, it's really hard to keep people in that career path unless they have a spouse that's, making substantially more money, which is unfortunate. And this is why I think that it is a government problem. It is a public sector problem, because there needs to be some sort of subsidy, of sort of program that supports the families who are trying to access childcare because it's becoming increasingly unaffordable for regular people who are going to work each and every day across sectors, and childcare workers are not getting paid enough. So, that's the problem we have to solve for. And it's a solution that we can't in Allegheny County alone own. It does require state partners. It does require the Fed stepping up because we need money to be able to do it. And it might mean that we have some other creative tools to raise capital to put into this childcare ecosystem.
Just to circle all the way back around, I know that EO is forthcoming, but do you know what the pay rate's going to be for some of these childcare workers if you're able to get it through?
No, it won't cover that because we are preempted from the state from setting any sort of minimum wage. So
rude.
I know. So when we're talking about raising the wage, I think the biggest thing that I have asked for from the state is just to remove preemption, because a minimum wage in Allegheny County is different than a minimum wage in Fayette or Bucks County or Center County or Tioga. Like this is...
Yeah. And our minimum wage here in our state is the lowest in the nation at $7.25. Yes. It's shameful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So let's talk about housing, because you just signed this pretty ambitious executive order called Housing for All. The idea, I think, but please correct me, is to create a unified countywide housing strategy. So tell me about the order and what it does.
Great. So Housing for All is just codifying a lot of the work that we're already doing and then adding some ambitious housing goals. And there's really a few sections of it. So one is collecting data that we know we need. So we're doing a housing needs assessment, which the county has never done. So that tells us what kind of housing needs to be built where.
Like how many vacant properties we have,
exactly.
How many houses we need and what kinds, that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. It doubles down on our blight remediation and land bank work. So we're really thinking about could we have a countywide land bank? What's the feasibility of that? What's the cost associated with that? We have a vacant property recovery program. How do we beef that up? How do we make sure that we can move properties more quickly into hands of neighbors that can do something, with these vacant and blighted properties? It also builds on our successes. So we had big wins last year in the 500 and 500 initiative, which was moving people from shelter to homes. And by day 500, we had housed 622 people. A lot of that was just reconfiguring bureaucracies so that they work better for people who are entering the system, and also re-ups our First Home Allegheny, which is our first-time home buyer program that we were able to put $2.4 million into and help 56 new homeowners in the county, which is really exciting. So it builds on those successes. And then the most ambitious thing it does is create a fund that we can preserve and produce housing from. And we set a goal of raising between $50 and $100 million into that fund.
And that's just like we're at the beginning stages of fundraising for that?
Yeah. So we're actually working with consultants who are helping us architect what the parameters of that fund is, because the idea is that we will put some public money in it, but we raise from the private sector. We raise money from the banks, and that allows them to get a small return, but it allows us to get this pot of capital that can move quickly. So when a LIHTC, which is a low-income housing tax credit, a property, if that's expiring, we can purchase it. If a multifamily unit comes for sale, how do we as the public sector be able to react to that quickly and competitively to purchase it so that we can put it into a portfolio of housing that remains affordable or mixed income in perpetuity? It really gives us the tools, more tools in our toolbox to be able to address the severe shortage of affordable housing that we have here in the county.
When you say it like that, it sounds sort of simple. Our city has tried quite a few of those strategies before. Mm-hmm. And gosh, the progress has been glacial.
Yeah.
What makes you look at that example and think, you know what, I think we can do it. I think maybe we could do it better, faster, stronger.
Well, I think scale is important. So doing something countywide is
Which
critical.
sounds like it would be harder. That's a lot more people, a lot more land, a lot more property to deal with.
Yeah, but you end up reaching scale. Like, for example, if you're talking about specifically land banks work the bigger they are, because you have some properties that you sell to developers at a profit, and then you have some properties that you ultimately subsidize to get that title free and clear and get that property stabilized, and you give it to a nonprofit so they can build affordable housing, or so you kind of can work out this balance sheet. Land banks will always need to be subsidized almost entirely, like by public dollars in some
by
form
design.
or fashion, but it doesn't mean that you can't create streams of revenue. So the more properties you can put in a land bank, the more you can make it add up and achieve financial sustainability.
What do you think the barriers are going to be to some of this? Like the study, of course, will help, but like just wrapping your head around the scale of the need seems like maybe step one. Do you anticipate, any, we'll call it challenges to some of this?
Well, the fund is novel for Allegheny County. So, the city they do have a housing trust fund, and that's publicly funded. So they just take some taxpayer dollars and they put it towards that fund. We're saying we're putting money towards a fund, and then we're going out to the banks and having them invest in this fund. And so it gives us exponentially more money. And what we need right now are big moves. We've seen that in the governor's budget address, where he declared that he wanted a $1 billion fund for critical infrastructure, and a big part of that is housing. So people are asking us to not move around the edges anymore and really say we're okay with putting big dollar amounts into housing so that we can actually feel the change. But it is a new thing for us. So we're using best practices and examples from across the nation, and, working with some really amazing and proven consultants that have done this successfully in other areas.
I mean, can the city work with them too?
I think, we'll figure out what that relationship looks like and how our housing vision marries the vision of the new administration. But, I don't see why there won't be a healthy collaboration there, because housing is something that's needed everywhere. But, what we've seen, what early data is telling us, that a lot of people are being priced out of the city proper, and they're moving into county suburbs. So
yeah, it seems like the city's loss is actually, by and large, Allegheny County's gain, and to some extent our surrounding counties gain as well.
Yeah. So we're trying to, like with First Home Allegheny, a number of people moved from the city, were like renting in the city, and now purchased a home in one of our municipalities within the county. But we also got a couple people from who were right outside of the county and other, in Beaver and Butler, who moved into the county and bought a home, which was great. So yes, as people get priced out of the metro, they can, there's plenty of opportunities to live in the suburbs. I just moved to a municipality, so I live like 2 blocks outside of the city. But I still have the city feel, the sidewalks,
the city postal code,
the city postal code, the whole thing. So, there's really an opportunity for us to, actually have a housing plan for the 129 municipalities. The city in previous administrations have tackled housing, and we are grateful for that. And also, housing need extends far beyond the boundaries of the city of Pittsburgh.
And unfortunately, this is not a set it and forget it situation. It's just a constant rolling need. It does really feel like there is so much work to do here, and you do have some data. I'm just going to read a little bit here from the EO because I think it's fascinating. About a quarter of households in Allegheny County are considered cost burdened, meaning that they spend more than 30% of their income on rent or mortgage. 30% is kind of that national threshold that we're supposed to use to try not to go over that. The county's housing authority has a wait list of over 4,000 households Wow. And a lot of people, of course, I think we all know this, are living in very old houses. They need repairs. A lot of homeowners can't afford that. It can get really challenging. And you're one HVAC crisis away from like being in a real financial pickle. How do you decide what to prioritize? Like once the studies come back, say everyone's on board, how do you pick? How do you do this?
Yeah. The other thing that's happening too is that private equity is buying more and more single family homes throughout the county, which is another challenge.
Yes. The corporations are also with us and part of this conversation.
So, I mean, we really have to say this is an all of the above approach. And that's why this housing EO is so multifaceted, because it's going to have to be several different avenues we proceed down simultaneously in order to begin to have people feel like the housing crisis is being addressed in a meaningful and comprehensive way. So we're going to do it all. We feel like we have the capacity to do it. If data tells us otherwise, then we need to figure out stronger partnerships where we can, build up the capacity of an outside organization, whether we need to hire and build up our internal capacity. We need to work, closely with municipalities because they run all the land use and zoning, which the county does not have control over. So it's going to be around, for us to be successful, it's going to be take those strong partnerships and that creative thinking, and also not being committed to like, well, this is the way it's always been done. This is the way this money has always been used. So, we're really shaking that up with this executive order.
Let's say some piece of this works. Like, do you think you can then apply those lessons in ways that, because I feel like often with this stuff, we start rightly so with folks that are in our deepest levels of poverty. Certainly that's what 500 and 500 approached. But do you think you can also make headway maybe with folks that are just above those poverty lines? So often they fall through the cracks, or even so many middle class families that are making these calculations around their families and their shelter. And you just can't afford everything in this moment.
And childcare.
Yeah. Or just not having children. Maybe you want them very much, but you can't make that choice financially.
Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, this is why we are doing this, because traditionally the money we get from the federal government says you have to use this for the most vulnerable. So we're saying, you have to be, they define chronically homeless, and that's typically like living on the streets for 30 plus days. So, even with 500 and 500, that was using money in a new and different way, because normally people wouldn't qualify for housing until they were quote unquote met that chronically homeless threshold. But it doesn't serve us by having people stay in shelter longer. It's not good for them. It's not good for our capacity. It's not good for the workers who are assisting those individuals. So, that was targeting a population that we really hadn't seen in our homelessness system. When we designed First Home Allegheny, we used monies that, yes, it was below 80% area median income, but we also carved out money for 80% to 120 area median income for down payment assistance, because we know more and more working class families, middle class families are just finding the American dream, the dream of owning a little piece of Allegheny County.
Building some form of generational wealth.
Exactly. It's just far out of reach. So we are really targeting that population with a lot of this executive order, because not to say that the need doesn't exist with, our lowest income neighbors, with individuals with mental and behavioral health needs, with folks who are in reentry programs. All of those programs still exist and are very important, and we will continue to fund and continue to support with the workforce necessary. But also, we're starting to address this need that you expressed with the way that you framed your question, is just every single person is feeling the crunch when it comes to being able to afford a basic standard of living. So how does government step in and be a force for good and help families that are just doing everything right and can't get ahead and can't find that path to generational wealth? So that's what we are focused on in many ways with this executive order.
Anything else that you're really excited about that your administration is trying to tackle right now?
I think in the housing space, just another point is that we're learning from national best practices, but we're also learning from like local best practices. So
tell me who's winning locally. Yes, give me some.
I think
celebrate something.
We mentioned, the city land bank and how it didn't move properties for a long time, but there's another land bank within the county called the Tricog Land Bank, and they've moved hundreds of properties, or I don't know hundreds, but like definitely over 100 properties very successfully. And so, how do we build on their success? Can we scale that across other municipalities? And that's like why we're pursuing the feasibility study of a countywide land bank. What else is going on? I mean, our county housing authority is really being a rock star. Like they're being really creative on how they use different financing tools and, how they're partnering more strategically with the city housing authority, which tends to have the resources, but not necessarily the capacity for management on properties. So like there's just like stronger relationships there. I think there's just some really good foundational work to build from, and it's exciting. And we've seen, the projects that are happening downtown, if they're taking advantage of the tax credit program, they have to provide some, portion of that to affordable units. So we're going to see, yes, housing supply increase downtown, but also hundreds of units that will be affordable to, regular people who have jobs downtown, so it is exciting, and we're just going to continue to build on those successes.
I don't know if I'll get to talk to you between now and the draft. Anything? I don't know. What's brewing? What's cooking? I was down on the North Shore the other day talking to some folks that work like kind of along that main drag on North Shore Drive. Mm-hmm. And they were laughing about the 10-foot wall that's about to be erected behind their buildings. Mm-hmm. And how crazy it's going to be that like every parking spot for like the footprint of the draft has been leased for like 2 months by NFL officials. What's that look like from where you sit?
Well, it's going to be exciting. We're going to, welcome a ton of people here. We're going to put Pittsburgh's best face forward.
You look tired saying all of that.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be, you mentioned the businesses. There will be traffic pattern disruption.
They were excited, to be clear, but yes, there was also it's yes and.
Well, and I think the footprint was, very intentionally, they weren't included in the footprint so that people didn't have to go through security to go to their establishment.
Exactly,
so,
yeah. And I think they were appreciative
if you don't want to go
that.
in there. So there's been a lot of intentionality and engagement with folks who would be in that immediate vicinity of the draft footprint. But we're excited. There'll be some surprises.
What are we going to serve people when they get off the plane at the airport?
You know what? That is a question that I have asked, and I'm really looking forward to the answer. I think little pierogies, because they're just
it's got to be pierogi. They can be made in advance. Yeah. They're delicious.
You can accommodate a lot of different dietary needs, restrictions with a pierogi. So I think that's a good food that's emblematic of our region. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I'm excited to go down and check it out. I have no idea how I'm going to arrive. I've been plotting it for weeks.
Okay.
I still not there. Do you know how you're going to get there? Like
I
there and
don't
back?
know. Probably, I don't know, maybe I'll take a PRT bus.
Yeah. Like at this point, I'm thinking like I'll drive north, take a park and ride, hope for the best. I'm really not sure.
Yeah.
Or ride my bike from like Brighton Heights. Like, I don't know.
Hopefully the weather's good.
Well, and that's the other thing with all the snow. Like we could end up with like flooding and landslides in April. Like, God willing, no.
We're really, I mean, we've taken that into consideration through our emergency services, and we feel very confident that will not be the case.
Okay. So. Yeah. The National Weather Service is against landslides this year. Like, is that what I'm hearing?
We're just,
are we manifesting that?
We've looked, I think we've looked at the amount of snow and ice that exists along our rivers, and we're not immediately concerned that it will result in flooding in April.
That's such an official answer, but I like what you're saying. Actually, one serious question that a friend of mine asked, and I think it's a good one. Have the Steelers yet, speaking of football, talked to you about a public funding mechanism for a new stadium? Because the lease is up after the 2030 season, which means the time is probably nigh for them to start talking about that sort of thing.
Yeah, we remain in constant communication about that.
It was very controversial last time. Are we going to get public funding for that? What do you think?
We remain in constant conversation and negotiation around that.
Okay. They're going to want a roof because we really want a Super Bowl. They've been talking about that for like 50 years.
That's probably out of the budget.
It's really expensive to have a roof.
Yeah, I mean, if someone from the private sector wants to pay for that, Godspeed. But
Sara Innamorato, thank you so much.
All right. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
That is all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. You can support us by becoming a CityCast Pittsburgh neighbor. All the details are at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow with more from around the city. We'll talk to you soon.
Oh, puppy. We've got a very happy, stretchy puppy.